Your testimony is Bob Mueller did not kick you off because of the content of your text. He kicked you off because of some appearance that he was worried about.
Sure. My testimony, what you asked and what I responded to, was that he kicked me off because of my bias. I'm stating to you it is not my understanding that he kicked me off because of any bias, that it was done based on the appearance. If you want to represent what you said accurately, I'm happy to answer that question, but I don't appreciate what was originally said being changed.
I don't give a damn what you appreciate, Agent Strzok. I don't appreciate having an FBI agent with an unprecedented level of animus working on 2 major investigations during 2016.
I can assure you, Mr. Chairman, at no time in any of these texts did those personal beliefs ever enter into the realm of any action I took. Furthermore, this isn't just me sitting here telling you, you don't have to take my word for it. At every step, at every investigative decision, there are multiple layers of people above me, the assistant director, executive assistant director, deputy director, and director of the FBI, and multiple layers of people below me, section chiefs, supervisors, unit chiefs, case agents, and analysts, all of whom were involved in all of these decisions. They would not tolerate any improper behavior in me any more than I would tolerate it in them. That is who we are as the FBI. And the suggestion that I, in some dark chamber somewhere in the FBI, would somehow cast aside all of these procedures, all of these safeguards, and somehow be able to do this is astounding to me. It simply couldn't happen. And the proposition that that is going on, that it might occur anywhere in the FBI, deeply corrodes what the FBI is in American society, the effectiveness of their mission, and it is deeply destructive.
Just one example of a rather testy exchange. That was Trey Gowdy, the South Carolina Republican congressman, and Peter Strzok, the former FBI agent who was fired as part of this investigation. Let's get some analysis on this and other issues. Republican Congressman Chris Stewart of Utah is joining us. He's a key member of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, what's your reaction to this hearing so far? I don't know how much of it you've seen, but it's very, very tense.
Yeah, it is testy, I think is a good description. I haven't been able to watch all of it, obviously. I've been able to see parts of it. I actually cleared my schedule a little bit so I could have some time to look at it. Wolf, I think that Peter Strzok has got a problem. And that is, you can't say the things that he said in what he thought was a private email where he could express himself honestly. You can't say you smelled Trump voters. You can't call them backward redneck hillbillies. You can't express that kind of animus and really hatred, not just a few times, but dozens, if not hundreds, and then stand before the American people and say, as he said, well, that wasn't really how I felt. And if it is how I felt, it didn't impact my work. Oh my gosh, if this was a juror and you were a defense attorney, would you allow this juror to sit on a panel when they've expressed this kind of animosity towards someone they were supposed to investigate?
He did make the point, Congressman, that he could have exposed the entire investigation into then Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump in the summer of 2016. And he didn't expose that investigation was underway for alleged collusion, as they say. He says that was proof that maybe his personal opinions did not affect his work. Does he have a point?
Well, I mean, if it's a point, it's a very dull one. I mean, the fact that he didn't commit crimes doesn't mean that he wasn't influenced by his own prejudice and his own bias. And I also think, Wolf, to be fair, that when you look at not just what he said and look how he feels, we don't know. I'm talking about the outcome of these 2 investigations. I think he could certainly create a case that this individual and maybe a few others around him were very sympathetic towards Hillary Clinton, and that was reflected, and were very antagonistic toward the president, and that was probably reflected as well. I think you could argue that, but I guess time will tell as time goes on.
Yeah, this hearing is going to be continuing. We'll continue, of course, to have coverage of it. Let me get to the NATO summit that has just wrapped up, Congressman, while I have you. As you know, President Trump lashed out at some of America's closest allies, accusing Germany specifically of being a, quote, captive of Russia. Is talk like that towards U.S. allies and friends really beneficial?
Well, it probably, on the surface, I understand why people are questioning that, and frankly, I do as well. It's one of those circumstances where, were I president, I wouldn't have said it probably in that way. But the outcome of this is what I'm more interested in. And in my heavens, for years, I and others, and the president more recently, as he's begun to campaign and act as president, we've pointed out something that's just very obvious, and that is NATO has not carried their share of the weight. When I was a pilot flying in the Air Force, I loved my NATO brothers and sisters, but they were not capable of going to war with us the way that we hoped that they would be. And it's because they simply didn't fund their own self-defense the way that we needed them to. I think it's perfectly appropriate for the president to point that out. And though he does it again in ways that perhaps you and I wouldn't, if we get a better outcome, if they're willing to take more of that burden and say, we'll carry some of the responsibility for defending Europe, our own backyard, I think that's a positive thing.
But wouldn't it be more effective to have these kinds of serious discussions with NATO allies behind closed doors, quietly, privately, as opposed to a public rift developing, which only plays into the hands of the Russians and Putin, who want to see the U.S. break away from NATO?
Well, I think two things, Wolf. One is we've had to have those private conversations. As I've said, as my role on the Intel Committee and other positions in Congress, I've been to Europe many, many times and have had these conversations, and it didn't have any effect. Now, of course, they're not going to listen to me, a little old congressman from Utah, but there's been many others who have tried to persuade them, and again, they didn't respond to that. In this case, they have, and maybe that public pressure made a difference. And the second thing is, the last thing Vladimir Putin wants is for the United States and for NATO to increase their defense spending. That's going to be the outcome here. Even though it, some may say it stressed the alliance a little bit. Once again, I think we understand NATO as a foundation for defending democracy in Europe. I don't think that goes away because of some of the things President Trump has said. And in fact, at the end of the day, it's probably strengthened if we better fund NATO's military expenditures.
Congressman Chris Stewart, I know you got to vote. Thanks so much for joining us.